Okay.
I got a little excited there.
All right.
All right.
We gonna get started here?
Yeah, let's get started.
Okay.
If we have anyone coming in, Robert, can you just either let us know or Heather, so that we can make sure we can let people in from the waiting room. Well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Obviously, the title and the sort of the background materials for the registration sort of tells you a little bit about what the session is about, but our focus today is really talking about helping school leaders redesign what teacher evaluation really looks like, focusing in on professional development and coaching. And as we get started and have a couple of folks still coming in from the waiting room, we have a do now activity for you. So you can see the directions on the screen.
We are going to use the annotation bar. So if you can find that, you go up here under view options, you'll find your annotation bar up here under annotate, and you'll be able to find that up here, and then you'll want to keep that handy. So keep that on your screen because you'll need to use these tools throughout our presentation. So if you want to use this and just, you know, use one of these, find the star or check mark, one of these tools on this bar, and mark what framework or evaluation tool that you're currently using in your district. Just to get our heads in the room around this work. I think it's under this stamp. Great. So we've got a state framework, district customized, good. Danielson. 2 Danielsons, okay. Always a favorite out there. All right, good. I think we've got 4 in the room.
Perfect.
Super. Okay. Let's move on, Ildi.
Yep, I'm working on it.
Okay.
Oh, here, let me clear the annotations.
Okay.
So many options.
Can I clear them?
Right.
Okay, you got it? Okay.
So we won't take much time to introduce ourselves. Since again, our bios are in the materials, but I'm Ildi Lasko-Kerr, and my colleague is Heather Cruz.
Heather Cruz.
And between the two of us, like many of you probably, we have been working in the education space specifically around teacher training, teacher growth, and teacher evaluation for the better part of our professional careers. And so our goal today is really to share some of our experience in past systems, to think through and how we can influence changes in future systems that you might be considering making in your school or district. The learning objectives are presented on the screen. I'll just leave them up for a few seconds for you to review. They were in the description for our session today, but you can see our goal is really to be an interactive session. So please feel free to engage with us using the variety of Zoom tools that we have available. And the first thing we're going to do is actually ask you to participate in a poll. So I'm not sure if you've used Zoom polls before, but on your screen, you should see several poll questions. And so just go ahead and answer those. And we'll share the results of the poll as soon as we close it. Great, we're gonna leave the poll open for maybe another minute to let the few of you that are still finishing up complete your poll.
Stacy, you can certainly answer for your state. That's not a problem at all.
Great, thank you. Or for, I also know a lot of other people who are connected to other places. I can just give my general.
That's great, Stacy.
Feel free to weigh in.
All right, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results so that everyone can see. So hopefully on this screen, you can see based on your feedback. Obviously, the major impact of COVID has been requests for teaching online rather than in person, and some for other accommodations. Interesting that there's obviously in a small group, someone who has no new teachers, which is fabulous, but the other two we've got between 1% to 5% new. And then thinking through which of your teachers thinks they feel like a novice given the changes to teaching in the online environment. It's really a pretty widespread here. So not a lot of consistency in the data, which is perfectly fine. Our goal really, and thank you for participating, was to make sure that we could orient the conversation that Heather and I are going to have today with you around what your current problem of practice is.
I'm just going to move the poll so that you can see our data slide. So we just pulled some very, very recent data. Just recently, I don't know if you saw the USA Today article, teachers are reporting that 20% aren't going to return to the classroom after this whole experience with the coronavirus and going through this whole redesign and all of dealing with all of the stuff they're dealing with in here. And then according to Gallup, and I don't know if you saw the most recent Gallup poll that was out, but the primary reason teachers gave for leaving their last job was career advancement or development, with 60% of teachers who left voluntarily citing reasons related to this category. This percentage shows that many teachers might not have felt challenged in their work or received individualized opportunities to growth and or advancement, so they just left their job. Even though many districts invested heavily in professional development programs, these opportunities might not have been individualized to teacher-specific growth and development needs. And then we have 32% of teachers reporting that they are likely to leave their jobs this year, even though they would have been unlikely to do so prior to the pandemic. That's up from 26% that were polled on July 23rd and 12% that were polled on May 28th. So this plays into staff morale and even student relationships. And then that goes to our top statistic there in the top right-hand corner. We all know the cost of teacher turnover in our systems and what it costs to develop our teachers over time. And then the more seasoned the teacher, the more effective the teacher, the more it costs to develop that teacher. So this is going to be incredibly hazardous to our system.
So as we think about our conversation today, our goal is really to think through how do we redesign our teacher evaluation systems, especially thinking around professional development and coaching, to address the data that we know, which was coming at us before COVID, right? That the Gallup poll was created and completed before sort of the COVID pandemic and the impact of those teachers choosing to leave. So the issue that we have around growing and supporting teachers throughout their professional careers is not something new, right? It didn't just happen this spring. And so we're going to invite you to think about teacher professional growth really as a journey, not a destination. Where so many times over the course of the last decade, with Race to the Top and other initiatives and teacher evaluation redesigns based on the widget effect that many of you might be familiar with, it's really been a compliance-oriented activity. Really trying to determine, are you an effective or an ineffective teacher? And that's been the driving force of both the feedback that teachers have gotten for a long time from either their administrator or an instructional coach, or the professional development that they've been given and experienced. So our thinking is really that clearly we need to start to redesign the ways that we support teachers. If such a large percentage are leaving because they don't feel supported throughout their professional career, what can we do as leaders to really shift that process for them? Heather, would you like to add anything to that?
Just that when we look overall, that and you said it very well, Eldy, our current systems have so much inherent bias in it, huge subjectivity. So much is top down, and not even top down from administrators. So much is politically driven. So much of that. And it just has really lost its way. We've forgotten why we do teacher evaluation, right? To help proliferate the growth of teachers, growth and learning of teachers. So we need to really help get back to that and to help put teachers in the driver's seat.
I've got a comment. Quick. If you want to check that. So we, excuse me, think about promoting professional development, and really what does that mean in your school or district or in your experience, knowing that we have a broad range of participants on the session today. Professional development as a journey rather than a destination really requires us to think about across the continuum of knowledge, expertise, and otherwise evaluation classifications. So I'd like you to just think about whatever current system you're most familiar with, whether that's the district that you're working in, or a district that you're working with if you're a supporter, and just reflect on that system for a minute and think through how well does that system actually provide support, either professional development or coaching, for teachers who are labeled or identified ineffective, to move them to effective. And on the other end, how well do you think your system supports teachers who are already effective to grow in their practice? So I'm going to give you just about 30 seconds to reflect on your experience and evaluate whether or not you think that your current system really promotes professional growth and development. So by way of either using your annotation options or your thumbs up emoji reaction button, so whichever one you feel most comfortable with. So you've got the option of just your reaction button, thumbs up, if this is true, if you believe that your system promotes teacher professional development, or again, that annotation button that Heather walked you through at the beginning, you can just put a quick little star on the screen. So I'll give you a minute to just react to that. And I'd love to hear quickly, whoever annotated with the star, that you do agree that your system does promote professional growth across that continuum, to just share really briefly, what is it about your system, or what have you created that does that? Feel free to unmute.
Hi, this is Karen. And we use Danielson in Washington State. And I think that our principals in our school district have been transitioning to an observation and a review of student data prior to teachers setting student growth goals and a focus area. And that's really made teachers feel like there's some value and purpose to the evaluation process. So they work with their teachers. Well, first of all, they model their own theory of action in relationship to their evaluation tool, and then they try to encourage that approach to the evaluation tool as well with teachers.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for sharing. So then when we think about that and think about shifting our practice, you know, what would that look like if we put teachers in the driver's seat with regards to their own evaluation and giving them some choice? That seems a little bit scary for us, having been at the district level for a long, long time. I can think that that might scare some of us at that level and think, what's that look like? You know, think about maybe looking at the INTAS standards, really a nice document, the way that it's been reformatted. And looking at the standards and the learning progressions for teachers, they describe increasing complexity, sophistication across all teaching practices, across a continuum of development. They have a degree of sophistication that distinguishes a teacher's level that are meant to be used across all levels of teaching, not just for new teachers. I think that's one thing that we also forget with regards to teacher evaluation, is that it's not just for new teachers. How do we also grow our excellent and our highly effective teachers? How do we give them really good, appropriate feedback so that they continue to also grow in their practice? And then when we look at that next level of how do we redesign that professional development and coaching around all of that, you know, professional development is no longer simply just a training or a workshop that teachers attend. It needs to be personalized, aligned to targeted goals. And those of you who know those INTAS standards should recognize this wheel. It needs to be interactive, engaging, focused on action, available when teachers are ready for it, and followed by coaching and support. And we're going to talk a lot more about that coaching and support. And then if anybody is familiar with Kraft's work, he's done a lot of research in this area, that intensive coaching programs have boosted teachers' classroom practice by more than 20 percentile points, as measured by classroom observation instruments. And then also that increased participating students' performance by about 6 or 7 percentile points as compared to students that didn't have that support. So we know that coaching matters, and good coaching matters. It makes a difference.
Perfect. If you're not familiar with the InTask learning progressions, in a minute or two, we're actually going to include in the chat box a document that has a whole bunch of resources. One of those is the InTask standards learning progressions. If you are, what you know is that those are really agnostic to teacher evaluation frameworks. So whether you use Danielson, Marzano, Strong, or a state framework, the InTask learning progressions can really sit right across the top of those to help understand, sort of thinking through teacher growth in across that progression, as opposed to in a silo, or only focusing, like Heather said, on those new or new to teaching teachers. If we think about just the redesign then of professional development and using that InTask learning progressions framework as a way to think about what strategies we have available to us, you can see on the screen that really now professional development needs to have a very broad understanding. We need to see teachers as learners across not just the continuum of their experience, but really as learners using a variety of tools, frankly, in the same way that we want teachers to think about their students as learners, right? So very interactive, giving them access to opportunities for independent study, collaboration, engaging in texts and media, as well as those professional development workshops. But we also want to redesign and think about professional learning as part of those informal systems of collaboration, mentoring, and coaching, whether you have a formal instructional coach assigned to you. And then really critically, to ensure that we value and honor the time that debriefing and reflection play in professional learning. So in most systems to date, they may have one or two of these sort of components as part of their professional development design, but we're really encouraging you to think about how can you leverage each of these strategies to improve the way that you focus on growth for your teachers. And again, growth is for 100% of your teachers, not just a certain subset. So we were going to put you all in a small group to go through and have a quick conversation, but because we're recording and that may make it a little bit more challenging, and we're already a fairly small group, what we'd like to do is really give us an opportunity just together to think about the question that's on the screen. How has your school or district created personalized or differentiated professional development for your teachers? So we'd like you to think about sort of the redesign professional development that I just shared with you, those multi-modes, a variety of different opportunities. And then just either in the chat box, if you want to type in any of your strategies that you've already used to differentiate and personalize for your teachers, or you're welcome to unmute yourself and we can just have a quick dialogue for a few minutes around this question.
I don't think they can get to the chat box with you sharing. Can you get to the chat box right now? Oh, you can. Okay, thanks.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I know it's, as co-hosts and hosts, it's a little more clunky, but
Okay.
just listen quickly.
So, or we can just chat out loud. We don't have to.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to just throw out some suggestions of how you're doing this currently.
This is Stacy. I have a very outsider perspective on this because I am not a teacher. I don't work in a district. I'm looking at it more from someone who works in the possible development of materials. But I've had a lot of conversations with my son-in-law, who's a third-year teacher in a school for very underserved and marginalized students in Rhode Island. And it's a really interesting school that, very progressive, very idealistic. But he says, I asked him a lot about professional development, and he said, the official professional development, they just kind of pull you out, you go to some sort of, training, and he found it very uninspiring. But he said that the personal coaching from mentor teachers and experienced teachers, which goes on all the time, focusing on different topics or focusing on problems that come up, he said that, that's what helps him. Now, those are two sort of extremes, there's nothing in the middle. One's very informal and one's a little rigid, but I thought that was interesting.
Thanks for sharing, Stacy. I think that's actually more common than, one would maybe think, right? I think a lot of teachers, regardless of their number of years of experience, feel like they get told to go to a training that may or may not match what they need, and they kind of sit and get and maybe can use some of the information, but those informal systems and networks of learning really are the most valuable to teachers. And so that may also be more formalized if you have a mentor assigned to you or an instructional coach assigned to you, but oftentimes that's not the case, and even just that collegiality is an opportunity for professional growth. Anyone else want to share a way that you're familiar with either personalized or differentiated learning?
We see that Karen shared in the chat that they've offered leveled classes for Google Classroom and Seesaw to all staff.
Perfect. Is that, Karen, just as a result
of? She's on
the
phone.
Oh, sorry. I'm curious if that's just a result of COVID-19 sort of modality, or if that happens beforehand. So we'll have to circle back and see.
Yeah.
Great. So we'll shift our thinking to instructional coaching a bit.
Right. So we know that research says that there's compelling evidence for instructional coaching, right? Effective instructional coaching encourages collaboration, reflective practice, embedded professional learning. It promotes a positive cultural change within your campus. It's linked to teachers' increase in using data to inform their practice. It promotes the implementation of learning and reciprocal accountability. It supports collective leadership across an entire school system. And an instructional coach is somebody whose chief responsibility is there to bring evidence-based practices into classrooms by working with teachers and other school leaders. And it's interesting what Stacy said is that, you know, the one that is even more important is the one that, you know, that my son chose, right? So they kind of found their own perfect match.
So in the chat box, if you wouldn't mind, what words come to mind? So now that if you've heard sort of one definition of what an instructional coach is, we're just curious, what words come to mind when you hear that term, instructional coach? And then we're also curious if you're in a school setting or familiar with a school setting, is it a struggle to find instructional coaches in your particular setting? And then lastly, thinking about, you know, what might be a reason why it's challenging, right? So if you have heard about the struggle or if you're struggling yourself, what is it about finding instructional coaches that's the most challenging to you? So just an opportunity for us to share what we know about instructional coaching.
And again, you can share this out loud or you can type it in the chat box. Right, improving teaching and learning. Absolutely, Ashley, thank you. Does anybody have trouble finding instructional coaches? Experience, aware, research yet?
Perfect. Thank you for annotating.
That's great.
Using your Zoom tools wisely.
That's awesome.
What we hear oftentimes is that there is a perception of an instructional coach as a fixer, right? Somebody who is only assigned to a teacher when they need help. And so it can, in some settings, become a very negative or pejorative association. So I'm curious if anyone else has experienced that or has worked with schools where that's the case. In terms of finding instructional coaches, I think one of the, again, both from experience, Heather and I have both been, she's currently in a district and I've been in districts myself. I think one of the biggest challenges to find instructional coaches is the desire not to pull your greatest teachers out of your classroom. Right, that oftentimes our instructional coaches are our most experienced and our most effective teachers. And so the desire to spread their knowledge to others is really great and it's tempting, but it also creates a challenge in terms of the fact that they're leaving their classroom behind. And some of our greatest teachers don't want to leave their students and take on that role. So if there's anyone else who has, another kind of a challenge that they've faced or heard of, we're curious to know that.
And we also hear budget, that you can't afford them, that just budgets have become too tight and you can't afford to fill them in the budget anymore.
Mm-hmm. And scale, I think, would be the next kind of big thing. So even if you can afford a few of them, there's just not enough to go around for all of the teachers that you would want to assign an instructional coach to or want to make them available. Mm-hmm. So let's think a little bit then about how do we redesign then instructional coaching. I'm going to clear our annotation.
So when we think about looking at redesigning instructional coaches, you know, we want coaches to, or we want teachers to reflect on their practice. We want them to identify specific things. We want to support teachers through implementation, continuous feedback. We want to guide their inquiry, right? And Oldie mentioned this, the idea of a coach as a fixer, right? And so often we would send an instructional coach in to fix the problem with the new teacher, right? You know, get in there and fix that problem. But what about our veteran teachers? You know, do they get coaching? Because so often they really want that coaching and feedback. They're trying something new. They're being risk takers. They're trying a new curriculum, or they're trying a new strategy. They really want really good feedback, but they don't get an instructional coach. They don't get that option. You know, they don't have the fixer, you know, or the fixer, there's no budget for that. So what do we do for them? So, you know, what if we turned instructional coaching kind of on its side? What if we differentiated it based on who needed it? We differentiated all of that based on needs. It increases the efficacy of all teachers. It would be available to all teachers across all of their teaching journey, including our most sophisticated teachers. Our coaches would be evaluated using a 360 evaluation processes. Then we would also utilize technology to help keep our best teachers in the classroom, and supporting our kids while also supporting others with this excellent instructional coaching model. Leveraging them as coaches.
Perfect. So I'm going to ask one of the members of our team, Robert, in the chat box, if you could just put in the strategies document. So in the chat box in a second, you're going to see a PDF that you can download, as well as a hyperlink if you can't download for some reason on your system. I want to make sure you can get to both of them. The tool that we've created as a support to this session really is just a two-pager that has a variety of information that our redesign strategy suggestions for professional development and for coaching, but then some more specific and targeted videos, blogs, short articles, and resources that you might want to use as you're exploring this consideration. And again, a quick link to the in-task standards. So I'm going to ask you for just to take a minute and either download that PDF document from the chat box or click that link to the web page and access the document, and just quickly review that two-page document and put in an exclamation mark next to anything that you want to explore, because we're obviously not going to have time to explore them all here today, but we want to give you a chance to look at the resources that we've compiled for you, and then just interact with that document very quickly so that you can create that anticipatory set for when you do have a bit more time to look through that. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to download, access the document, and quickly review the resources and the strategies that are there for you. I love it when technology decides to just freak out on you. So I'm curious if anyone has any particular strategy or material or resource that's in that 2-page document that you just have any questions about right now, or if that's piqued your interest that you want to quickly have a conversation about. If you do, feel free to just unmute yourself.
I'm apologizing. I have a dog that is starting to whine in the background. So I mean, but there was something I got distracted by her, but there was something about just-in-time resources, I think, for distance learning that looked interesting.
Yes. So that is an example of a way to curate essentially choice content for teachers based on their needs. So if you, each of those links, when you're doing it online virtually, is a hyperlink to a document. So definitely make sure that you copy that link that Robert put into the chat box, and feel free to just put that in a browser. Those hot links or hyperlinks will take you to a resource that you can download and share with teachers that might need it. And that's a great point. Part of the PDF is that you should also be able to click the PDF when it's open on your desktop, and that will take you to the same hyperlinks. Obviously, if you print that document and hand it to somebody else, those hyperlinks aren't going to work. But fingers crossed that even the electronic PDF opened on your desktop should take you to the right resources as well. And if you ever have trouble with any of those resources, my contact information is on that handout as well, and I'm always happy to share those directly if for some reason it doesn't work. So as Heather said, we know the power of redesigning our systems and creating professional learning opportunities across the continuum for our teachers that are based on differentiated professional development and learning for teachers, as well as really strong, effective coaching. This is just a summary of some of that same data that she shared earlier from the Craft article. But the idea of this intense, individualized, sustained work at the teacher level, where the teacher drives their learning, really has the opportunity for palatable and real results, both from classroom practice, as you can see, in terms of 20 percentile points or higher, but as well translating that into student achievement results. So our conversation that we'd love to kind of pivot to for the remainder of our time is really thinking through, how do we in earnest begin to do this work, right? Or frankly, I guess maybe another question is this a problem worth solving, right? So we'd like to just invite a conversation with everyone around some solutions that Heather and I and our team are starting to think about, creating a platform for teachers to be in the driver's seat, to be able to have access to real-time, just-in-time curated content through resources, but access to that high-quality instructional coach that can support them no matter where they are in the journey, that isn't necessarily linked to, or doesn't have to be linked to their own district or school. Because we know of the issues around capacity and finances and budget. So I'm going to open the floor to Heather as well, to just kind of give you a little bit more of an idea of how this might look in terms of creating a system in your school or district, or with districts that you know that you're working with, and then really invite you to share if you feel like, or if you would agree with us, is this really a problem that's worth working on?
Absolutely. Thanks, Hildy. So, trying to build a system that also works for your compliance button, saves your administrators time, energy, and also maybe helps them build instructional capacity, and puts your teachers in the driver's seat, which all of that may sound a little bit scary, But at the end of the day, we believe through all of our research really would build huge efficacy in your systems around instruction and good instructional capacity with your teachers, also with your administrators in your buildings. So building a platform using technology as the leverage point allows you to be very nimble with a system like this. So just wondering if this is something that is worth, again, solving. Just interested in hearing from you all.
And feel free to unmute yourself if you want to
Yeah,
jump
I mean,
in
it's
and
very
share.
different. It kind of flips
Yeah.
the script. So it kind of takes a minute to get your head around it. But once you do, you're going to like, wow, I'm kind of freeze things up a little bit.
Karen, you mentioned that using the Danielson framework, you're definitely doing a lot more with your leaders and instructional coaching and assigning and working through that process of data-driven decision-making. Is there anything that we've kind of presented today in terms of redesigning that system that you think would be, that would support the work that you're doing in your district with your teachers and leaders?
Yeah, I think, you know, that the menu of options, you know, teachers want to improve, but they don't always know what they need to do to improve, or what the right professional development is to improve areas. You know, we talk about how important it is for principals to name practice for teachers. Teachers are often doing high quality things, but they don't know how to repeat them, and they don't know where to identify that in the framework.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, as a principal, it's really important that they're naming practice and then connecting it to effective outcomes for students. So, you know, I saw you do this, and as a result, students did this. You know, what's your next step in this area? What's something I can do to help you? And so, you know, this kind of bank of resources that you're providing help principals offer suggestions, but more importantly, to get to your topic, that once a principal has helped or collaborated with a teacher on their practice for improvement, then they can start looking at this menu of options to kind of plan their own course for growth.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. Thank you for sharing and connecting that to the work. You're exactly right, right? So much, we put a lot on the plates of principals to coach and support teachers. And so giving them some support in doing that work as well is really important, because as their plates continue to get piled on with more and more tasks, oftentimes more administrative tasks than instructional, you know, duties, that tug and that push and the pull for good quality time with teachers can fall by the wayside. So our goal really is to also absolutely support that administrative leadership capacity through some of these resources. Anyone else want to share just your thoughts or your feedback? Ashley or Stacy, Galen? I like to tell my students that wait time is my superpower. So I'm not disturbed by uncomfortable silence. All Why don't we just jump to any, just open questions for the floor. So if there's anything about what we've presented or talked about, any of the resources, the research that you might want to know a little bit more about, or something that may not be clear in terms of the way that we've presented it. Any questions?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a question, but I would just say I think that teacher evaluation and teacher growth has kind of gone by the wayside as we're answering kind of all these basic needs right now. And so I appreciate the presentation and the new approach. So thank you to both of you for bringing this topic forward.
Thanks,
You appreciate
Karen.
that.
Yeah, thank you. Because we can't let it go by the wayside, because teachers are dying. They're leaving the profession, and we can't let that happen. We've got to start nurturing them and bringing them back. We got to do something. So thank you very much for your feedback.
Heather, did I see a chat, someone add to the chat?
Yeah, we've got a couple of comments. Thank you for the handout. I'm looking forward to exploring the resource. So thank you. Thank you to Stacy, and thank you to Ashley very much.
Okay. Well, if just in the last minute or two that we have, if you wouldn't mind, Heather and I are a little, speaking of evaluation, evaluation junkies ourselves.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. So if you have an iPhone or a QR reader on your phone, you can actually just hold it up to the screen and take a quick little snapshot of the QR code to go to a very short survey. If not, Robert's going to put the direct link into the chat box for you so that you can just click that link directly. And if you wouldn't mind, before you leave our session, answering those few short questions so that we know how we can improve both this presentation, the content, and the resources that we're providing for you. You're also invited, if you're a social media user, to join and follow us on our Facebook page. It's Lotus Training and Consulting Group. Part of that page is really just designed to support and provide just-in-time curated content that's very specific to instruction, teaching and learning, leadership. And my email is on the screen, but also in the handout. So if after today you have any questions or want to engage or have a further conversation or dialogue, I just would welcome and invite you to just shoot me an email and let me know that you watched either the session asynchronously later on and want to follow up or have questions, or participated live with us today and want to continue to engage in the dialogue.
Thanks, Stacy. We totally understand. Take that puppy out. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to everybody who joined us today. We really appreciate your time, and we do appreciate your honest and pointed feedback today. Really do appreciate it. We know you could have been elsewhere, so thank you.
Yes, very much so. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you, Karen. Bye now.
I'm going to stop sharing. Go back to the real world.
Let's see, I'm gonna pause our recording now.